Hello, friends, and welcome to this session on what, why, and how by Stats SD. This session, we will understand what is regression, why should you study regression, and in our second part, we will understand how to calculate regression using a manual method, and also I will demonstrate how it can be calculated using a software. So let's start this session. I'm your guide, Professor Stanny Dias. What is regression? Regression is another statistical method similar to correlation used to examine the relationship between one dependent variable, usually denoted by the letter y, and one independent variable denoted as x. If you're working with more than one independent variable, it would be denoted as a multiple linear regression. The aim of regression is to find the best fitting line or a curve that would describe the relationship between the variables. If you remember, in our previous session, we understood what is correlation. Correlation tells you about the magnitude and direction between two variables. Let's take an example of height and growth, or age and height. Normally, you would notice that as a person grows or the age increases, there would be an increase in height normally. It would show a positive correlation. Whereas, if I take an example of the number of hours spent on social media, it would be negatively correlated with the grades of a student. So, correlation only tells you what is the direction and the magnitude of the relationship. If we want to predict what would be the change in the dependent variable, we would need to make use of regression. And that is the point that we are trying to understand. So, if I have to recap, regression analysis is commonly used for predicting, forecasting, and understanding the strength and direction of the relationships. I have an example for you in the next slide. On the left hand side of your screen, there are two variables, price and sales. If you notice, the range starts from say 84 and the highest observation in price is 103, whereas for sales, it would range from 500 to 800. If I would have calculated the correlation coefficient, it would have shown me a negative correlation coefficient, which might be moderate or strong. So in a sense, it tells me that as price increases, the sales would decrease. Can I see that on the screen? If you look at the scatter plot, I have made use of the Jamovi software to plot the scatter plot. On the x-axis, I have plotted price and the dots denoted with price, and on the y-axis, I have sales. If you look at the arrangement of the dots, the software Jamovi tries to plot a straight line passing through it, reducing the distance or squared distances between the dots. And this line can be converted into an equation. So how does that equation look like is what we will see in our next slide. So those are called as the parameters of the regression equation. If you notice, the equation is very simple for one dependent and one independent variable. That is y, sales is my dependent variable, and x, which is price, is my independent variable. Now what is the meaning or the significance of this equation? It has a and b. A denotes a constant or a value of y when even x is 0. Intuitively, please understand that we know that if I'm looking at a relationship between advertisement and sales, unfortunately, even if 1 year the advertisement goes down to 0, Yet there would be some sales which would be either walk-in sales or tele sales, and that value of sales is your constant. B denotes the regression coefficient, or sometimes called as the beta coefficient. If I have to explain it in simple words, you can understand it to be a multiplier, a positive multiplier or a negative multiplier. A positive multiplier would increase the value of y, and a negative multiplier would reduce the value. If you saw the example in my previous slide, price, as price increases, the amount of sales decreased. So we would have a negative multiplier. So I use the software to calculate A and B. If you look at the table below, the intercept shows 1778, which is my constant, and the multiplier for price is minus 12.1. If I put it in the equation, I can denote it as y equal to 1778 plus minus 12.1 into x. Now I want to predict what is y if the price is set as 100. So I put 1778 plus minus 12.1 multiplied by 100. So that would be 1210. And finally, if I solve the equation, the predicted value of y is 568. In essence, I am able to predict what would be my average sales if there is a change of 100 units in X. This is our understanding of what is an regression equation. Now it's important to understand why study regression. Regression helps in prediction and forecasting. By prediction, I mean if I can predict what would be the change in the dependent variable, this is the change in the independent variable. So it helps me make better decisions and plan ahead. If I want to understand what kind of relationship exists, I can clearly identify from the equation if it has a positive or a negative, and also I can understand what would be the magnitude of the relationship. So in a previous example, minus 12.1 denoted a negative relationship and 12.1 was the magnitude. Modeling complex systems, regression analysis helps us model and understand these relationships. So if you have multiple variables, we would be able to make a complex model. In research, especially, we want to test if something affects another variable, but significantly using hypothesis testing. So regression analysis can also help us in terms of research. In terms of control, risk management, regression analysis is very, very useful, especially in the finance domain, to reduce risk. By historically looking at the relationship between variables, I am able to manage the risk more effectively. And finally, even policymakers would be using regression analysis. Now, coming to how to calculate the regression equation, that would be the content for the next video, where I will teach you how to calculate regression equation using the least square method and the step deviation method. So this is, you can do it using a pen and paper. And also I will use a software, because in today's day and age, understanding or interpreting relationship is more important rather than calculation. So see you on our next video. Thank you.